Robotica-st. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest and greatest of robot podcasts. It is the Robotica-st. That's right, a podcast dedicated entirely to everything Robotica. I am Anderson9132, the Robot Wars guru, and joining me we have...
It's me, it's Jimmi Cottam of... what have I done that's quite notable recently?
You built a pretty cool arena.
I did. I built the arena. I've done 3D printed Dominator 2. Robotic Idiotic is my kind of YouTube project, isn't it? That's where I build crazy little robots. I did
it's a very, very good channel.
Why, thank you very much, sir. Your channel is also pretty good as well. Yeah, Robot Wars.
Let's not get carried away. So, what are we doing here? Well, we decided that there's plenty of podcasts all over YouTube discussing Battlebots or Robot Wars, but none that we're aware of that discuss Robotica, which was a US robot combat-based show from back in the day. A little bit more on that later. But we decided that we wanted to do a podcast on it. And because we're pretty good friends, we thought we would try and do it in a sort of two mates at the pub discussing the football kind of way. Unfortunately, because COVID-19, the pubs and football have both been cancelled. Great. So instead, we're just going to do the normal route of a podcast, because that's what everyone seems to do in this community.
Well, yeah, exactly.
So, when it comes down to what Robotica was, essentially it was a US robot combat, and I'm using the word combat very lightly because it was very minuscule in the combat side of things. But it was a robot combat show from the early 2000s. Filmed around the same time, I believe, Series 5 was being recorded for Robot Wars. I think that's the case.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, around about there. Obviously, there were quite a few robots that appeared in Extreme Warriors that appeared in this show, and there was quite a few robots that appeared in Battlebots that appeared in this show, and we will discuss that as we get to them. But overall, it was a show that was very much like the first two series of Robot Wars, only done... well, correctly, where they had the trials and the Gauntlet sort of feel to it, and it felt really grungy and all that, but they allowed the robots to also come into contact with each other and actually fight whilst doing these trials to make them a little bit more exciting. And the trials were the same every week, so it wasn't unfair. And certain robots, it wasn't like certain robots that wouldn't do well in one could then do well in another. You know, it was very much an even Stevens thing. So that's basically how Robotica worked. Now there would be two groups of two robots, and there'd be in Series 1 there was the silver team and the gold team, because they did it via colours for some reason, and then in Group B there would be the red team and the blue team. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss one group and how well they did in the trials, and then we're going to discuss the second group, how well they did in the trials, and then we're going to go on to the fight, to the finish. More on that later. So, are you ready, Jimmy?
Absolutely. Let's get to it.
Jolly good. I just remembered, actually, this is the first ever episode of Robotica, and it's the first one, so we best discuss the hosts. Oh boy, they are interesting, to say the least. First of all, surely you know Frank Zappa, Jimmy, being a guitarist.
Of course I know Frank Zappa, yes.
Jolly good. His son, Amit Zappa, obviously inherited the drug-taking abilities from his father, and he is, of course, the host of Robotica. And he is, without word of a lie, coked out of his skull, let's be honest now.
He was quite exuberant, like he is pushing it to the max sort of thing.
But to be honest, I like that. I actually quite like that, because it's you know, I'd rather someone flamboyant and into it than somebody who just sits there and goes, okay, next robot now.
Yeah.
It's much more entertaining. And like I said, he seems to really get into it. And he's got good chemistry with the other two as well. Speaking of the two, we have Tamika Ray, who is very enthusiastic despite not being over the top as well, because sometimes you get these ones, like Amit, for example, he's enthusiastic but he's really over the top. She just seems to just really be interested, and that's about it.
I mean, I suppose that kind of dynamic worked well in Robot Wars, didn't it? Like, Craig Charles was always the exuberant, shouty, loudmouth standing at the top of the arena. Philippa Forrester was more calm, more sedate, like taking an easier approach to going around the pits. So it's a tried and tested formula, let's say.
Yes, definitely, and it works. And then you have Tanya Meme, who appears 3 times in the episode. What is the point in her being there?
Tanya Meme.
Yeah, me.
Yeah,
that'll do.
She was kind of like another pit reporter, as far as I could see.
Yes,
I'm unsure.
I'm not really too sure. We might see a little bit more from her later on. I don't know. I mean, maybe they were trying to figure out who should be the second person, so they were like giving them both a chance. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because she literally only appeared 3 times. She appeared briefly to warm up the audience, and then she interviewed the losers of the Speedway Trial, and that was it. You didn't see her again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's impressive, being a host and only appearing 3 times in an episode. That's good. But overall, I think the hosts were pretty enjoyable. They worked.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's very signs of the times, isn't it? That is how the sort of late 90s, early noughties sort of approach to TV shows of this, like, sort of caliber anyway, sort of, like, to ramp up the excitement factor almost. And I don't know, it was like the same with Robot Wars, the same with Battlebots, like having exuberant figures kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily say makes it more personable, but makes it more exciting.
Yeah.
Do you see where I'm trying to go? Like,
yeah, it draws you in.
It's not selling itself as a science show, it's selling itself as a robot fighting show.
Which is quite odd, because it is definitely a science show.
In a way, but not in the same way that Techno Games was. No,
I can agree with that. But they do still focus quite a lot on the science and the technology of robot combat. And I guess that's kind of why they were so over the top in a way, because they thought maybe people aren't going to take to this, so to make it really seem more interesting, we're going to have these really vibrant hosts that are really into it, which I guess works, Yeah,
I like robot shows having exuberant hosts anyway. It works the dynamic quite well.
Definitely. So, with that all being said, let's move on to Group A. So, like we said, there's 2 robots per group, and the first robot we're introduced to in Group A, representing the silver team, is Killer Bee, which looks nothing like a bee and doesn't have a bee on it, so I don't understand why it's called Killer Bee.
Yeah, I mean, Killer Bee, that did appear in Battlebots, in a more bee-like guise, might I add. They did have black and white, they did have black and yellow stripes, so that's where the bee comes from. Although Chuck McManus, the team captain, he did mention why it's called Killer Bee. Did you pick up on that during the episode?
No, I probably didn't. In all fairness, it was very early this morning and I was still half asleep.
He said that because of the motors in his robot create this electric buzz as they power up. That's where the name Killer Bee comes from, because it sounds like a bee. That's
fair enough. I mean, I like how on BattleBots they did definitely paint it up nicer. Could it have killed them to put a bit of paint on it for Robotica? I know Robotica again is more about this technical side of things, but it just looks a bit boring.
It had some stripes.
Woo! Oh, sorry, I take it all back. One interesting thing actually is that it says on robot features that it's invertible. Now,
used the term bimodal. I've never heard that term ever before in fighting robots.
I've heard of invertible, which sounds a lot better than bimobile, if I'm honest. But I mean, they rant on about that quite a bit, and again, I get that this is like the first series of Robotica, but anybody who's watching Robotica is going to have watched either Battlebots or Robot Wars in the past, so they know what an invertible machine is, because they've been a meta for quite a long time at this point, with big flippers becoming popular. So, again, I kind of get why they bleated on about it, but at the same time, I just think it was kind of pointless going on and on about it. Also, this is definitely a Robotica robot because it's a wedge with a box on the end of it.
Yeah, that kind of features pretty heavily all over Robotica.
Again, I think it's fair to say that it suits Robotica's style over, let's say, BattleBots, definitely.
Yeah.
And then we have facing off against them. This is really odd. Mini Inferno.
Mini Inferno, yes.
Which is a lightweight robot.
A tiny robot in comparison to Killer Bee.
Very, very small. And of course, any eagle-eyed viewers will know that this, of course, was Dr. Inferno Jr. From Battlebots. A very, very successful lightweight. Won 2 lightweight championships, to be exact. So very, very successful indeed. The thing is, it's a lightweight, so it's never going to do well in the fight to the finish. So we saw a lot of it, you know. We'll get to it again in a bit. We saw quite a lot of it being dogged and determined, but no, there was no way in hell it was going to win the episode. So it felt a bit of a waste to me.
No,
but at the
not
same
compared
time,
to,
it is enjoyable.
Not compared to the other competitors, at least. Like, I put 36 IBS. I got pounds abbreviation wrong. It should be LBS, shouldn't it? IBS is something completely different. 16 kilograms is how much that weighs in our more home units, let's say. 16 kilos. That's, what, featherweight weight?
It's just over featherweight weight. Featherweight weight is 13.6 kilos.
That's right,
so
yeah.
Only just over. I mean, basically, in Robot Wars, it would have been a very lightweight, because the lightweights could go up to 27 kilos.
Yes, but no, it was a carbon fibre composite construction. Try saying that after you've had a few.
And if you what, Jimmy? Cups of tea?
Yeah, sure. And it was powered by some power draw motors, which is actually a method still used today. Yes,
it is, which is quite surprising, really. You think that something... I mean, I don't want to say obsolete, 'cause that's a bit harsh, because a lot of robots do use them to good effect, but something so back in the day, I guess you could say, is still a much used thing today.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, there we go. So obviously, between these two, it would be quite obvious that it would be to the basic viewer, it would be like, haha, Mini Inferno's screwed. It's never going to win this. But it actually put up quite a surprisingly good punch.
Yeah.
As we find out, first of all, in the Speedway. Now, the Speedway Trial was simple. There's a figure of 8 track. The 2 robots race around it. When they come to meet in the middle, they can fight or whatever they want to. The idea is that every lap they do, they get 10 points, and then the first robot to get to either 8 laps or to do the most laps overall gets a bonus 20 points, which is completely understandable and fair. Killer Bee won. I can't remember exactly how many laps it did now. I think it was 6-4.
Let me see if I can work it out from the points. Killer Bee scored 80 points in that, so that would have been
6 laps plus 20.
Yeah, 6 laps.
Yes, and then Mini Inferno scored 40, so they definitely got 4 laps.
Yeah.
And it was a good... To be fair, I'll say it now. The Speedway isn't really the trial for me. It's like the featherweight stock car trial for me from Series 1 Robot Wars. I just don't really find the excitement of seeing robots racing around a figure of 8 track. But this was quite good. It was close. When they did come into contact, it was interesting. I loved Mini Inferno's tactic of using Killer Bee as a skateboard ramp. Yeah, it was purposeful. We wanted to go over them because we didn't want to get squashed by them.
I mean, truth. That sort of tactic kind of played well in their advantage. You know, the lighter weight. Comparing the size between Killer Bee and Mini Inferno, like I say, Killer Bee is such a bigger machine compared. I think Mini Inferno kind of had to ramp over Killer Bee to, you know, get an advantage. And
it was close, and it nearly worked. I mean, like I said, 6-4. Now, I haven't seen, obviously, apart from this episode, I haven't actually seen any of Series 1 of Robotica. I've only seen Seasons 2 and 3. So I'm not too sure how much closer they are as they go along, but I can imagine that 6-4 is quite a close race, considering what's yet to come in Group B, but we'll get to that later. Of course, it all ended horribly wrong for Mini Inferno when they used their skateboard ramp tactic and ended up throwing themselves upside down.
Well, yes.
Yeah, a bit of a flaw in the plan.
That's the risk you kind of play, really, if you're using your competitor as a launch pad.
I mean, to be fair, I'm all for it. Riskier the better. You got to take risks. Why not do it? Fantastic. Exactly. And he's a great character as well. I've completely forgotten his name because I'm terrible with names. But the guy who created Mini Inferno, he is a good character. Jason
Bardis, his name is.
That's the one. That's it. Sorry, I'm terrible with names. Mini Inferno. Just ask Gladys here. Sorry, go on.
I kind of like this event as a kick off to the series. It kind of shows you how well, I mean, figuratively speaking, how well a smaller weighted robot could do in this event. Like we say, using the tactic to drive over Killer Bee, that could have worked purely in its advantage if it wasn't so light and ended up upside down. But
if it was invertible, it would have been fine.
Well, yeah. I actually thought Killer Bee was off to a bit of a rocky start. Like, I didn't think they were very well controlled to begin with.
Yes, they seem to be. One thing I've noticed is that those, I don't know what's on those rails, but they seem to be magnetised or something, because a lot of robots seem to find it very easy to just drive into them.
Oh, the sidewalls, you mean?
Yeah, the sidewalls, yeah. Sorry.
Well, I've got a point to make on that later, so we'll...
I think I know what you're talking about, old boy.
Yes, exactly.
So yes, for a Speedway event, this was actually pretty entertaining stuff. So yes, as my good colleague stated, Killer Bee ended up with 80 points, and Mini Inferno ended up with 40 points at the end of that. And then we move on to the next trial, which is the maze. Now, can I just say, oh my god, this thing looks amazing.
Amazing.
Why did I think of that pun beforehand?
See, this is why you invited me on, because I fill in them puns.
Mate, anybody who's been a long time viewer of mine and knows that I am quite good in the pun section, Jimmy puts me to shame, so we've got a lot of that to look forward to throughout this podcast.
Well, I am a father. I have to play the dad joke card at least once.
It's because you got the dad advantage.
Yeah, the dad vantage. Oh my god. Anyway, yes, thank you for joining us on the Robotica-st. It's been a fun episode, but I'm going to have to go and put my head down the toilet now. Yeah, the maze. I put in my notes, it's kind of like the Robot Wars Gauntlet on acid. Like all the features, like you had quite a lot of crossover, I think. Like there's a seesaw in there and various ramps.
Yeah, they got like the car door thing going on as well with
car
the spike door
thing. Yeah, but I put in my notes that there's a seesaw, a roadblock. Was it a roadblock? Yeah. The spiked panels of doom. The guillotine of death.
Even though it's not a guillotine.
Like, as opposed to the guillotine of life. Like what sort of the guillotine is it? It's more of a portcullis, isn't it? The
guillotine of paper cutting.
Yeah. Some bumps as well. And also a nice water feature in there.
It's the first arena I've ever seen with a water feature in it. It's
exactly.
Brilliant. We need more water features in robot combat. Yeah, I also want to state that Killer Bee's tactic for this was to put duct tape over their robot. Because,
waterproof it.
Trusty duct tape, Oh, brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. Also, before we got to the maze, we did get to see something which I really did like. We got to see the actual teams repairing their robots and discussing what was wrong with them and what needed help with them, which is something I think that a lot of robot combat does miss, because, yes, it's nice to see the destruction and the carnage, but sometimes it's nice to see what went wrong and how they're going to fix it as well, especially if you're hoping to build one of these in the future. And I also like that they made it a bit more personal. They actually gave you some personal information about the Roboteers as well, the team captains. I thought that was very nice. You got to learn a lot about Jason, for example, with Mini Inferno, and the fact that he was doing a PhD at the time, which I didn't actually know, so that's really cool. And again, you see more about the actual build process of the robots.
I think he said he was 7 years into that PhD.
7 years?
I think that's what he said, yeah.
That's impressive. 7 years.
So
I can't keep the attention span for 7 minutes, let alone 7 years.
Yeah.
So again, the maze works very much like the Speedway, only the points are different. So every obstacle cleared is 15 points, and then the first robot to finish gets a bonus 25 points. So that's how it works. And Mini Inferno 1, get in, doing it for the little guy.
Killer Bee was running upside down as well in this.
Yes.
And backwards, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that kind of didn't make any sense to me because...
Well, if you think about it, when you've got an invertible robot, you probably know this anyway, but when you flip it upside down, your controls are inverted. So forwards is backwards and backwards is forwards. Whereas if they're running backwards, so upside down and backwards, then the controls don't need to be flipped. So
yeah, that makes plenty of sense.
Makes sense in a control sort of sense, but yeah. I don't really know why they went with running upside down. I said I don't really know why they went with running upside down anyway. They said for ground clearance, but Killer Bee was kind of hindered still by its ground clearance issues.
Yes, the bumps, which I want to get to, because we've got all these amazing hazards, like you said, the spiked gate of doom and the guillotine of death, and the thing that KO'd them was some little elevated bits of wood, I think they were, or plastic in the middle of the floor, and that seemed to be what was the main hazard to watch out for in the maze, from what I could tell anyway.
Which may I say, like, Mini Inferno completely blew past them. I would have thought that would have been a problem for such a low-slung robot like Mini Inferno, but no, made short work of that. They were
almost as tall as it. That's what surprised me. It went straight over them. I was like, oh, all right then. And like you said, Killer Bee, they managed to get themselves beached. And I think if they had gone over them forwards, they wouldn't have had that problem. I think it's because they have the larger wedge at the front, because that would have been a bigger ground clearance gap, they would have had no problem going over them. But because they went backwards over it, they got themselves wedged a bit easier, and I think that's what did them in the end. But like you said earlier, I can understand why they went backwards in the end. Sorry, go on.
I mean, to be honest, like, my robotics knowledge is fairly limited, let's say. I don't know how hard it would have been to invert something in the internals to make it run forwards but upside down. Do you see what I mean? So
yeah,
that
I know
would
exactly
be
what you mean.
Going wedge first.
My robotic knowledge is even more limited than yours, so I have no idea how easy that would have been. But I see what you mean.
But you know, in my eyes, it would have made sense to run wedge forwards with a slightly altered electronics layout. I think it may have played better to their advantage, but what do I know? I'm not the one with robots like this.
I'm not the one with robots, full stop. So there we go. See, this is it. Typical armchair roboteers over here.
Yes.
Or a desk chair at this point.
I've been to events. I've been to one.
Now, to be fair, yes, you have been to an event and you managed to get a good record of 12 seconds running, was it?
Yep, 12 seconds. That is absolutely correct. 12.
Hey, it's more than me, so fair play, mate, fair play. So yes, Mini Inferno did win in the end, and one thing I also thought was a bit funny was because it's such a small robot, he couldn't actually see it once it got past the guillotine bit, so he had to get his friend to go down and shout to him directions.
Shout instructions. Because I saw it, I'm like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like, it turns out that it was constructive in the end.
Yes.
Just...
I've never seen that as a tactic, sending a roboteer down to the foot level to shout instructions to them. That's brilliant. That is woke. That is that should have been a trial. You know, driving blindfolded, and then all you've got is your mate to tell you where you got to go. That's fantastic. But they managed it in the end, and they, of course, managed to get the bonus points as well. So at this point, the standing was... I'm sure Jimmy will be able to tell you, because I forgot to write it down.
Oh, the points, yeah. They're in my notes. So, in the maze, Mini Inferno scored 100, because it managed to complete the entire run. And Killer Bee scored 45, which puts Mini Inferno at 140 points overall, and Killer Bee at 125.
Ooh, so very close, and everything to play for here as we get to the Gauntlet, which is nothing like the Robot Wars Gauntlet, and nothing like the Gauntlet that would happen in the next 2 seasons. I'll be honest, I'm glad they changed the Gauntlet for seasons 2 and 3, because this Gauntlet isn't very interesting. Basically, it's a drag race, and there's varying walls of difficulty. So you've got a glass... Oh, sorry, go on.
I've got down in my notes, because I'm trying to play the humour card here. So our famous obstacles are a window, what looks like some bean cans, a wall, and a different type of wall, and then, of course, a safe, obviously.
Yeah, because why not a safe?
Why not?
Yeah, so you basically, it was a pane of glass. It was actually paint cans, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And then it was a normal brick wall, a concrete slab wall, and then the amazing safe. What makes me laugh is each one of these walls is meant to increase in difficulty, yet to get past each one they're the same amount of points, which is 15 points. And again, the first robot to get the safe over the line at the end is gets the bonus 25 points. So yeah, I don't really get that.
No. I mean, like you say, they changed it for the next season, so that's probably why, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad they did. We'll obviously get to that when we get to the next season. But again, for something that was so, in my opinion, didn't look like it was going to be that enthralling to watch, this was a hell of a race. And it was very, very close at the end, especially.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, Killer Bee's size advantage kind of played quite well to them, especially initially. But the last half of this, I was going to say fight, but the last half of this Gauntlet run, where did that surge of power come from? From Mini Inferno?
I know, it barely got past the cans, and then all of a sudden it's just knocking the bricks and the slabs out of the way as if they're nothing. It's like the Kool-Aid man going through a wall.
Like headbutting this safe, just trying to get it to move. But then conversely, Killer Bee comes back with another massive surge and pushes the safe over the line. It's like, I think this was quite a good, even though the Gauntlet you say wasn't a particularly great event on paper, this one I thought was actually quite a good test of skill for both of them.
Yes, definitely so. I mean, it was very entertaining, and even though you know it's not really going to do well in the fight to finish, you're egging Mini Inferno, and you're like, come on, please, come on, do it, and you're like, no, it didn't quite do it, which is a shame. And of course that meant that Killer Bee ended up with more points, which my colleague will tell you about.
Oh yes, let me scroll back up to my notes. At the end of the Gauntlet, Mini Inferno scored 60 and Killer Bee scored the full 100, which puts Mini Inferno at 200 points, but Killer Bee managed to claw it back in the end with 225 points.
Literally, that 25 point bonus at the end was literally what did it, so that just shows you how close this was.
Which means...
Awesome. Yeah, that does mean that Killer Bee is in the fight to the finish. Who will join them out of either a weaponless runaway or a bird with a sunset on the back of it? I don't know. Let's get to Group B, shall we? You can introduce the robots this time.
Okay, so Group B was the red and the blue team. On the red team, we had Run Amok. Do you know much about Run Amok?
I know that it was Runaway in the Robot Wars Extreme Warriors Championships. I know that Mark Jora, or however you pronounce his name, is still quite active in the robot community. I know that he's the creator of the Robot Combat Hall of Fame, which is a bit of a meh subject for reasons I'm not going to get into right now. But yeah, I know a reasonable amount about them. I know that it was rubbish in Extreme Warriors.
Well, I've put down that his son, Aaron, who is 9 years old in this episode, who is on his team as well, I think he founded the forum on the runamok.tech website, which was set up back in the day and is still active to this day. It's where the Combat Hall of Fame is hosted. But yeah, the Ask Aaron forum is a wealth. It has a wealth of knowledge for all types of builders. And it is still getting questions sent to it, and questions are still being answered. If you're interested in building robots, that is probably your first point of call, to be honest. Your answer is probably in there somewhere. And there is thousands of pages worth of questions and useful answers.
Oh, that's very interesting. I'm genuinely surprised that that's still going, actually, to be honest, considering, as you put it, it was made back in day. So, yeah. But no, I mean, Run Amok, again, it's a robot that's suited for Robotica, but it's not really suited for anything else, really. And when it came into Robot Wars Extreme Warriors, literally all they did was just attach 2 weird propeller blades to the side of it. I don't really know what they were intending to do with those, but I don't know. I don't build robots, so I haven't got a clue what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it was a very unorthodox design. It had automotive steering, like Onslaught. Onslaught had automotive steering as well.
Yes,
whereas,
and Kilohertz.
Oh yes, original Kilohertz did as well. Which robots tend to have tank steering, so they can turn on a dime. Whereas with automotive steering, if you're trying to get pointed in the right direction, you might have to do a 3-point turn.
Yes, which we will get to very shortly, I'm sure.
Just a little plug here. There's a video of Onslaught on my channel, which you should check out.
Oh, yes, definitely. Go check that one out. It's a awesomely shot video, and there's a plank stood right next to him while he's actually recording that video, so there you go.
Wait, that's you?
Oh, bugger. Sorry, I've lost and then gained weight since then, so I completely forgot that's what I used to look like. Also, with COVID going on, I look like the Wolfman's third cousin at the moment, so again...
Oh, yeah, me too.
But you always did, Jimmy, come on.
I need a haircut.
You a haircut?
Yes, I do.
So, what was the other robot then?
The other robot was Spring Breaker. I couldn't find a lot of information on Spring Breaker, to be honest. It had, like you say, custom paint job, sunset on the back, eagle on the front. That's somehow relevant to its
I
build, I suppose.
I don't get why custom paint job was such an important thing that they needed to put it on the stat board. Is there literally nothing else you could talk about?
I mean, I quite like the idea of its shape, like the angled edges. That sort of thing is still kind of rife in combat robotics, having a leading edge to face off like horizontal spinners.
Yes, and he did say that he based it on karate, didn't he? Because the guy who created it was like a really big karate fan.
Yes. I also put in my notes, constructed in a rented house living room. So even if you live in a rented house and you don't have a workshop, you too can build a robot for combat. I kind of like that.
Just make sure you put a carpet down because you want to get your security deposit back, alright? Just remember that. Right. I mean, I'll say this about Spring Breaker. It looked gorgeous.
Yes. A lot of work went into its aesthetics.
Yeah, and it's definitely the best looking robot in this episode. There's not even a doubt in my mind about that.
What else did I put? I put in that the captain, Rich Rindo, I think that's his name. That's how you pronounce his name. Who was working on a hybrid electric car, and he was a .com consultant, which firmly places this into the mid to early 2000s. Who uses the term .com consultant now? And hybrid electric cars, that's a norm now. So, Very early 2000s terminology there.
What I liked was that you saw it a bit, in its pre-maze run. I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but it had a great big piece of metal that he just attached to the front of it with zip ties to stop it from being uncontrollable.
Ballast to keep gripping the tyres.
Yeah. How little with zip ties? I mean, that's a bit of a last-minute addition, if you ask me. But okay.
If it works, if it looks stupid but it works, then it's not stupid.
Yeah, but you could argue it didn't work, considering we now have to go on to its Speedway run.
Well, yes. Shall we go on to the Speedway run?
I think we should, yes. First of all, Jesus Christ, run amok, go home, you are drunk.
I put in my notes that this is how I used to play Gran Turismo. Just using the walls to steer me around. Yeah, they kind of use the walls to get them around in much the same way that I used to badly play video games.
Used to?
I don't now. I know how to drive.
Yeah, well, you got one up on me there. You know, drive a real car. So yeah, this wasn't as good as a run as the other Speedway run, simply because we had one robot that could barely keep control, and another robot that barely worked. In fact, if I'm right in thinking, Spring Breaker didn't even manage to get a full lap in, did it, or did it?
Let's have a look in the notes. Spring Breaker. They scored 10 points in this, so I think they completed one lap.
They managed to do one lap.
Yeah,
compared to Run Amok's 4.
They got stuck on the wall, didn't they? That magnetised wall that you was on about earlier.
Ah, yes, the magnetised wall. Again, the best arena hazard.
But I think Run Amok kind of started... I think Run Amok knew it was going to win this, so started ramming Spring Breaker off the track.
Yeah, he just got bored. He's like, it's not working. I'll just give it a few cheeky hits. I felt a bit bad for Spring Breaker. It's like, it's barely worked, and now you're just adding insult to injury by just knocking it off the track.
I mean, I did think Run Amok did start to get some sort of control towards the end, though.
Yeah, it was a bit fiddly at first, and he seemed to sort of manage to get to grip. It took for him forever to get around the first lap, and then after that, he sort of figured it out and did the next 3. But
I think for the type of steering configuration, that sort of event works well in Run Amok's favour, because it's basically like a big radio controlled car, if you think about it that way.
Well, it was designed on a ride-on lawnmower, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
That's what he said in the introduction section. So, which fair enough. Yeah, can't fault him for that. And it does look like a ride-on lawnmower, so he's definitely done a good job on it.
And with them side blades that you put on it, probably is a lot.
Yeah, horizontal lawnmower blades. No, sorry, the vertical lawnmower blades. Sorry, they were vertical, not horizontal. That's even better. How much grass would they cut, do you think? Yeah, so I think we could both agree that this wasn't the most... It definitely wasn't the best one, but it was still relatively entertaining just because we saw Run Amok crashing into the walls and we saw it decide to just ram Spring Breaker off the track at the end. Yes.
I think that was the most interesting part about it, to be honest.
Yes, definitely so. And then, of course, we go on to the maze between these two. Now, I just want to say, you see Spring Breaker's first attempt, and you sort of get a feeling that maybe it's going to do the same thing for the rest of the trials. And yes, it's a definite. Yes. That's a definite thing.
Yeah, Run Amok ran without their front plate, their wedge, essentially, didn't they? They were just going bare. Going in bare. Whatever. But yeah, I think that worked again to its advantage because it's got them big pneumatic chunky tyres to get over the obstacles, like the bumps that what's it called?
Killer
Bee struggled with previously. Yeah, I thought that the sort of tighter corners would have put it at a disadvantage, but I think they actually did quite well in this.
Yes, I was quite surprised myself. I thought, how the hell is this thing going to run the maze when it's, as considering a much wider playing field, it struggled so much. But he mentioned at the end that he geared it down to a lower speed so he had more control of it, which is, obviously it worked. And I agree, taking the wedge off definitely made sense because it meant it could get over all those obstacles a lot easier. I felt bad for Spring Breaker because it looked good, but it just, for some reason, it just seemed to struggle all the time, and it easily got itself beached. You can actually hear its tyres screeching trying to get purchased.
Yes. I wonder what that was. Maybe that was the ballast, because it was too heavy on one side.
Maybe he didn't do the zip ties properly again.
The zip ties.
Well, welding is important in robot combat, we've decided, ladies and gentlemen. No, but it was entertaining to an extent. I still don't think it was as good as the previous one because that one was, in my opinion, closer. But it was still entertaining. Although it was very funny to see Run Amok just completely overshoot the finish line and end up on its side on the other side of it next to a dead Spring Breaker.
like I've done so well in this competition, I'm going to run the same maze in the opposite direction.
Definitely so. But at the end of that, the points were...
Scroll up.
You can tell who does better notes out of me and Jim, by the way. I have literally no idea what I'm saying now. Meanwhile, he's got this amazing document, probably.
It's a PDF.
There you go, even better.
So, in the maze, Run Amok scored the full 100, which puts it up to 140 points. And Spring Breaker scored only 45, which increases it to 55 overall.
Everything to play for here in the Gauntlet.
Is there? Yeah,
no.
It's so close. It's nail-biting stuff.
Some people say that 101 versus Hypnotist was close. Nah, that's nothing. This is where it's at. Okay, we may as well get on to the Gauntlet. This, again, wasn't anywhere near as entertaining as the previous one just because of how one-sided it was. I mean, Spring Breaker couldn't even get past paint cans for crying out loud, or the bean tins, as Jimmy
bean
said.
Tins, yeah. No, I think Run Amok made easy work of the first few obstacles, like just blistered through the glass in the barrels straight into the bricks. It did get high-sided, though. Did get stuck on some of the debris.
Yes, a can got stuck underneath it, and to be fair, it did a good job of getting off of it.
It did. That's some classy driving, that.
Fair play, Mark. Fair play. Meanwhile, Spring Breaker, like we said, they just could not get past the cans.
No.
I don't know whether it was a power problem, whether it was just that the robot itself died unexpectedly. It just didn't seem to want to get past them. I mean, it literally bumped into them the same way pièce de résistance bumped into the concrete. Bumped into the concrete blocks in. I
was going to say, like, this is kind of very reminiscent of early Robot Wars. How one robot could dominate the first Gauntlet, but the next robot would struggle at just some bricks or in the maze or whatever.
Yes, definitely so. I mean, I do think that Robotica had a lot of early Robot Wars essence to it. I like the grungy feel that it had. It looked grungy and low-tech and sort of, it definitely looked like a robot combat show. I mean, Robot Wars, towards the end, it got really bright and colourful. And yes, don't get me wrong, it looked great, but it didn't have that scrapyard feel to it.
Yeah. But yeah, this is kind of an easy win for Run Amok.
Yes, definitely so. Definitely so.
Like, barely, apart from the riding high on the paint can, you say, didn't really break a sweat, I don't think.
No, and definitely not.
I don't think Spring Breaker really stood a chance.
No, which is a shame again, because the actual design of it, I think, would have been quite good at this, because it's got like the sort of angled edges in the plough to like sort of get past the walls. If it had
a fair bit of power behind its motors, I would have thought, they could have done really well in that event, but evidently not.
No, evidently not, unfortunately. So we say goodbye to Spring Breaker, which only got a measly, if I'm right in thinking here, it only scored 20 points, so it only got 75 points.
Let's have a look. Spring Breaker Yeah, they only scored 15 points in that.
And Runamok got 240.
Yeah, that is correct. So that was a contest, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was.
So we move on to the fight to the finish, which we've been looking forward to explaining to you all the time. This is as underground, basement, rural robot combat as it gets. You get this. Oh, sorry, go on.
What Mad Max film is this arena out of? Oh my god, there's like flames and jagged spikes, and it's raised up off the ground, and
it is awesome, isn't it?
I love the look of this final arena.
The only real issue I have with it is it's too small.
It is a little bit
too small.
It's a bit.
They make it bigger for the next few series, though, so we can't really complain too much.
It's a bit sumo basho, isn't it?
Yes, definitely so. Yes, definitely so. And that's basically what it is. It's a raised platform with very low side walls and lots of spikes around the outside and fire, because we love fire. And then what happens is, after a minute, the side walls drop down, which means it's essentially just a platform, and that means that a robot can easily be pushed off. And I was quite excited for this fight because you got two relatively well-driven, fast, nippy machines. We could have seen some good driving and some good action in this one, and it was over really before it even began.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think the advantage that Runamok had over Killer Bee was its grip. I think when it was pinned against the wall, when Killer Bee was pinned against the wall, as soon as them walls dropped, Killer Bee didn't really stand a chance.
Yeah, definitely so. I was quite surprised at Runamok's decision to go in without the wedge. I thought that was very odd.
Yes. I think the wedge could have played actually quite a good advantage in this sort of fight, but I mean, that said, they did have problems with that plate in the first Speedway event. It needed to be bent back into shape, if I remember.
Yes. Also, I guess, I mean, looking with the benefit of hindsight and seeing what happened to Killer Bee, maybe going without the wedge was probably the best option.
Yeah, I mean, this could have been actually quite a good fight if Killer Bee had the push, but it was quite short, really. I was a bit about this final fight.
Because
it could have had a lot more, Could have had a lot more.
Definitely, and also, let's be real now, it was roughly 30 seconds of just seeing them stood there doing absolutely nothing, waiting for the doors to fall down.
And as soon as that arena wall dropped, then it was game over, really, wasn't it, for Killer Bee?
Yes, pretty much so. So, I mean, it's an interesting concept, the final to the finish, and there were some good fight to the finishes over Robotica. We will definitely get to those in the future, but this, unfortunately, wasn't one of them. But that brings us to the end of this very first episode of the Robotica-st. We hope you enjoyed it. But before we get to the end, first of all, we have a couple of merits to give out, 3 to be exact. Jimmy, what are the merits?
So I thought we should have a rule of 3. You've got to have a rule of 3. 2's a bit odd. 1,
exactly,
just by itself. So our merits are favourite bot. So out of this entire episode, who was our favourite machine? Favourite event. So the sort of which group. So like red team versus blue team in the maze, for example. What sort of event was our personal highlight? And favourite moment. So which individual moment from an individual robot.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
That does very much make sense. To me, anyway, but then again, I helped you make the list, so it probably would. So, favourite robot of the episode. Who are you going for, Jimmy?
I wanted to like Runamok because that's kind of the most recognisable out of all these robots. But my favourite was actually Killer Bee. I thought Killer Bee, I don't know, it kind of appealed to that old school robot build that you saw in Robot Wars, especially a box wedge, 2 wheels, pretty simple.
Yeah, like old school but effective, simple in the shed build but very effective. And to be fair, they did, again, in their introduction, they explained that the reason why they designed it that way, and that, for Robotica, they built it to do well in Robotica, and that it made sense. So fair play to them. I did like Killer Bee.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I did like Killer Bee.
But then again, something like that, even in today's standards, you could run quite successfully. Are you aware of a robot called Merlin, Anderson?
No, I'm not actually.
I think it's owned by Alan Young of Apollo fame, Vulcan fame. That is a basic box wedge with a flipper, and they take it around to live events. And Merlin, it's an old machine, but it does still perform quite well. And all that it is kind of the same formula as Killer Bee, just with an active weapon. So I think, almost ahead of its time. No, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. It was definitely effective for its time. I did like Killer Bee, however, I have to go, personally for me anyway, that's Mini Inferno, just because of the underdog story and the fact that it didn't roll over on its back, despite being heavily undersized and heavily underweight compared to its opposition. And that is why I personally think Mini Inferno was my favourite robot of this episode. That was...
No, I can understand that. I think, like we say, with the weight disadvantage, should I say, I think they did quite well, especially in the Gauntlet, which I will come on to in a moment. But yeah, they did. They definitely pulled out the stops, especially during that last maze where they repeatedly headbutting that safe.
Yes, definitely.
Pounding the daylights out of it. And they were so close. They were almost there for such a tiny robot. Remember,
it was a matter of, I think, a foot difference. I think that's literally all it was.
This is a 16-kilogram robot. Like, I've eaten meals that are more heavier than that.
I think one of my arse cheeks weighs more than that, but there we go. Anyway, so on to our favourite event of the episode. Now, I'll be surprised if Jimmy doesn't agree with me on this one, because for me personally, it was the gauntlet between Mini Inferno and Killer Bee. Because it was, again, right down to the wire, very close. There was about a foot's difference in it. And it just showed that two vastly different robots as far as size and weight are concerned. It was very, very close. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed it.
You're going to hate me now because I actually do agree with you.
Oh.
Just to fill everyone in, this is take 2 of this part because I got the events mixed up, and now that he's actually gone through his argument, I actually agree with him. No, yeah, the gauntlet. I was originally going to say the maze with Killer Bee versus Mini Inferno, but just how close it was actually in that gauntlet, like that is some serious push from both of the robots, especially Mini Inferno.
And it had you on the edge of your seat as well. Like, I was genuinely like, oh, this is actually really close, and I'm not too sure who's going to win this. I mean, unlike the other one, which was a very easy foregone conclusion, this was very much a, nail-biting stuff here. Who's going to get this?
This showed how well the gauntlet run could actually be.
Yes, definitely so. When both robots worked well, it showed just how good it could be. Definitely so. And, of course, last but by no means least, the best moment of the episode. Jimmy, you go first on this one.
I put down Run Amok's maze because I think it used its advantages very well. It wasn't a perfect run. I do think there was a few issues in there, but I think with them chunky tyres, they took off the wedge, so that wasn't getting in the way. It was pretty bang on, they did everything they needed to do. I mean, it was against Spring Breaker, which kind of failed at the first hurdle, but I think for this type of event, Run Amok was set up correctly, and that showed.
Yeah, that's fair. For me personally, I'm going with the other maze. Specifically, the moment I loved was just seeing his teammate shouting directions for him. That was brilliant. I was laughing. At first I was very confused, and then I was laughing. And it just goes to show that certain designs might not work unless you have a teammate who's willing to shout themselves hoarse for you. So there we go. So what would you give this, if you had to give it a rating out of 10? What would you give it, Jimmy?
Oh, ratings. Oh, I wasn't expecting a rating. You've kind of sprung this on me. I think... I mean, it's very hard to compare because it has been quite a long time since I've actually watched Robotica. I think I watched it on Bravo. I think it used to be on Bravo in the UK.
Did it really? I never knew that. I only seen it on reruns on YouTube or whatever.
Don't quote me on that, but it definitely was on UK digital TV back in the day. And so this is kind of a refresher for me. Like, I watch Battlebots, I watch Robot Wars, I've watched techno games throughout its run. But Robotica's one that kind of bypassed me a little bit. So I haven't really got much to compare it to. I would say that this is a 6, maybe a high 6. High 6, low 7, you know?
That's fair.
It did a lot of things that we've come to know and love in Robot Wars, but it kind of amped it up a little bit more, you know?
Yeah.
To call this a robot fighting competition is kind of... It's not wrong, but it's not entirely 100% correct. So I'm trying to avoid that comparison. But, I mean... I just like the old school robotics, you know? I think that, like, early Robot Wars was scrutinised, or has been scrutinised, but I actually really dig old school Robot Wars. I think the sort of box designs of robots and kind of gives you the attitude that these machines were built in sheds and in garages and not in massive warehouses and workshops with thousands of dollars or pounds worth of equipment.
Yeah, and I 100% agree.
So I liked that whole aspect of almost going back in time to a simpler time, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Okay, Gramps. I'm joking.
Shut up. You're not that mature.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. It's funny, actually. It's ironic. In a particular group chat I'm a part of, I'm the oldest one in there, so everyone in there calls me Grandpa. I'm very upset about it.
What would you rate this?
It was interesting what you said earlier, because you said that you didn't really have anything to compare it to. So, and you're right. I mean, I don't really, apart from the later series of Robotica, which I have seen, but even though I don't remember them that well. So instead, I figured I would compare it to what I would expect from a first episode. And with that in mind, I think it did a solid enough job as a first episode. Yeah, okay, Group B was a bit... yeah, but Group A was fantastic. And I think that the layout of it was... And the hosts as well worked well enough to make me want to watch more.
Yes.
It wasn't like I watched it and thought, sod this, I'm not watching this ever again, you know? So with that in mind, again, I can't give it a ridiculously high rating because the fight to the finish is a bit of a anticlimax, and Group B wasn't great, but I'm happy to give it a good 6 out of 10 as well. Yeah,
6 out of 10. Yeah. I'll agree. I'll go with 6. I mean, like I say, with the fight to the finish, it was all built up to be this big bombastic fight, and it was just a bit of a pushing match, really, wasn't it? So
yes. For the 10 seconds we saw them moving anyway.
Yes, exactly. But I love the format. I love the look of it. Like, it is definitely taking that old school Robot Wars formula and Americanizing it. Like, you have to...
They've pumped steroids into it, basically.
Yeah, like it's kind of like they've watched series 1 and 2 of Robot Wars and said, let's do that, but let's add all these crazy stuff to it. So I like that. I mean, BattleBots in that sort of retrospect wasn't really as sedate. I mean, that was still kind of amped up, you know, it was on Comedy Central, for crying out loud.
Yes.
But no, I thought this was very good. I thought it was well presented. I like the robots. It gives me a real hankering to go out to my shed and build something out of scrap metal. And that's what I think robot combat shows should make you want to do.
Exactly, and if it wasn't for the weather being absolutely terrible where I am, I probably would do that right now. Also, I'd need some knowledge of how to do it as well. And some money for some scrap metal. Please donate to Anderson needs to build a fighting robot.org. That's a thing, apparently. Give me your money. So yeah, I think that nicely brings us to the end of this episode. So there's not really much left to do now apart from plug our respective channels. So, Jimmy, up to you.
Yes, so my robotic sort of projects I document on YouTube as Robotic Idiotic. I like to build little crazy robots. I do a bit of CAD designing. I designed Dominator 2 and got that printed out as a pullback scale replica. Just general robot fighting stuff. Nothing professional. It's just a hobby of mine, just to keep me active in the community and in the hobby. So yeah, I would appreciate the support over on my channel because I need the subscribers.
Don't we all know it, bless him. Seriously, go subscribe to him. He deserves it so much, bless his heart. And of course, I'm Anderson9132. I'm known for my channel, Anderson9132, where I do two main series. One of these is the Robot Wars Guru, where I discuss Robot Wars topics and discussions, etc., etc. And it's very, very popular. And the other one is a show where I play with toys, despite being a 26-year-old married man, which is also very popular. So go check it out. That sounds like it appeals to you. But with all that being said, I've been Anderson9132.
And I've been Jimmi Cottam.
And this has been the Robotica-st. Join us next time for 4 more boxes, more than likely, competing in the trial events of Robotica. See you then, take care, and goodbye.
Goodbye.